Hey folks, it's Rob Flux here with another Sunday session, and today we're talking about the 7 biggest mistakes that you have in starting your property development journey. Now, why am I doing this topic? Well, we're actually coming up to 10 years in the Property Developer Network, and we've got over 15,000 members, and I regularly and consistently get asked over and over and over the same things. And so what I thought I'd do is give you this Facebook Live to try and cover the common questions that I get and the common mistakes that I actually see by members of our community. Now, these are mistakes that I have made myself personally along the way when I was starting my journey, but they're, I guess, what I've seen our members of our community consistently do over and over. Now, clearly not everybody, so that's not the case. But I guess on my mission to try and set 1,000 people financially free, which is my own personal goal, I thought it was my duty to share some of these pearls of wisdom with yourselves today. So let's start with what is, I guess, mistake number 1. So mistake number 1 is, I guess, setting unrealistic expectations on yourself. That's the first part to this. It takes a long time to actually learn to become a property developer. You don't just do a 2-day weekend and all of a sudden you are a property developer, okay? It actually takes time and effort and skills to actually get to where you want to go. Now, Bill Gates famously quoted this. He said, we tend to overestimate what we can do in 12 months and underestimate what we can do in 10 years. And so property development takes time to learn. And if you're in a rush, then chances are you're going to make a mistake in trying to get to there and get that, I guess, get there way too fast. And so you're going to trip up on things that you just don't know. Now, the reason why I see this is because there are a lot of property spruikers out there that stand in front of fast cars and big houses and Learjets and all those sorts of things. And they promise what financial freedom looks like, which is this big, hairy, audacious thing. But in reality, most of us don't actually need that. What we really need is something a lot more tangible and a lot smaller. See, financial freedom is not the big house. It's not the big car. It's none of those things. Financial freedom is enough passive income to pay your current debts. So that is put food on the table, fuel in the car, send the kids to school, pay the mortgage, those sorts of things. Now, most people are living a fairly meager lifestyle. The Australian average income is about $80,000 a year, which means that we're living within our means. So chances are our bills are less than 80K per year. So for most people, that's owning 3 to 5 properties outright. And I guess in the property development journey, that's about 5 to 8 projects to actually get yourself there. So it takes time to actually get there. So you want to make sure that you're going to, firstly, don't go to try and get those big deals first go. You want to start small and you want to start on those little deals to actually hone your skills, learn your craft, I guess, make the mistakes on the small stuff as you then learn those lessons and then apply them in the bigger deals and the bigger deals. Now, when you start to do that, typically, if you're going to try and get, I guess, that financial freedom number, that 3 to 5 properties, most people can do that inside a 5-year period with somewhere between 5 and 8 projects, depending upon what development strategy they choose, depending upon the skills that they come in the first place, depending upon what their issues and challenges are up front, all those sorts of things. So now if you try to get yourself out with one deal, almost guaranteed you're going to blow yourself up. So instead, start small. How do I do a small version of what I want? There's a phrase that I love to I guess, impart on people, my pearls of wisdom, that is start with the end in mind. So if you know where you're trying to go, then you can actually then start to reverse engineer that and say, well, if I know what it is that I'm trying to get to, then I can then, what's a smaller version of that? What's a smaller version of that? So that's kind of mistake number 1, is that unrealistic expectations on ourselves. So don't try to go out with a big bang with one deal. Don't try to leave your day job after one deal. Pace yourself, get yourself right. At minimum, you want to get one project done, completed, and cash in the bank while you still have a day job. Preferably, you would have at least 2 of those where a payday, if it's not actually been received, it's actually imminent. That means you've had a day job earning you an income, and your property development job is now topping up your kitty and building yourself a nest egg. that nest egg is going to start to become important, because later on that nest egg is going to be the liquidity you need to run your deals, especially when you start to scale them. It's also what you're going to need, I guess, as you start to, if you decide that you want to leave your job early, it's what you're going to need to do to draw down on your, I guess, your nest egg in order to pay the bills while you're trying to, I guess, get the acceleration that you need. See, most people start doing it part-time. So 15 hours a week typically is what we encourage our people to do. And if you can do that and you can duplicate your day job doing that with 1 or 2 projects, then imagine what you can actually do when you are able to pull the pin. So my encouragement to you is to not try to do that too early in the piece. Now, depending on your development strategy, I guess it's going to take you some time to learn the skills. It's going to take you some time to, I guess, build the competency and then also the confidence. So being competent means you know how to do it. Being confident means that you're confident actually accept doing that, because whilst you know how, quite often we'll trip ourselves up, put little obstacles in our way and that sort of thing. So by the time you actually get the competence, should come around the 6-month mark, give or take. The confidence should come around the 9-month mark, give or take. And that's when that confidence actually starts to kick in. That's when you're likely to be deal ready. Okay, so deal ready means that you are prepared to recognize the deal and actually act on the deal. Now, the deal itself then is going to take some time to run. So depending upon your development strategy, if you're going for something like a subdivision, that's going to take at least 9 months to run. So you're at least 18 months in before you get your first payday. Okay. If you're doing a townhouse or an apartment complex, then they're typically 18 to 24 months to run. So that's 9 months to get into the deal, plus let's just say 24 months to run. We're getting close to 3 years before your first payday. So if you've got delusions of grandeur of making $1 million in the first 12 months, then whilst it is technically possible, it's a little bit unrealistic. And for anyone who sets themselves up for that, it's a recipe for failure. Okay, so make sure that you do the right things and I guess set yourself up for the long haul. Okay, that's really, really important. So that's lesson number 1. Okay, mistake number 1 that people tend to do. Mistake number 2 is not having a clear path for success. And because you don't have a clear path for success, it means that you're easily derailed and easily disrupted. So I want to give you an analogy. So a GPS, most of us are familiar with a GPS. Now, with a GPS, there are 2 really important things that a GPS does. Firstly, it is very clear on knowing exactly where you are. Okay. And the next thing is it's very clear on knowing exactly where you want to go. And that's probably the 2 mistakes that I see, I guess, combined together. They either don't know where they are or they don't know where they're going. And because of that, they can't actually measure whether or not they're on or off track. You see, if you don't know where you're going, then every bus is going to take you there. And you're only going to find out that that's not the destination you want when you actually arrive there and you go, actually, that's not really what I wanted. So it's very, very important that you actually take the time to do a self-assessment. Where am I right now? What are my assets? What's my liability? What's my budgets? All of those sorts of things. So it's really important that you understand that. Then you start to use that to then try to work out, well, what is it that I want to do? Where do I want to go? If I know what my budget is, then I know what the outcome is with regards to how many properties do I need to own outright in order to get that passive income that we were talking about before. So understanding that is really key. So because of that, I'm going to give you guys a little link, and that is to give you the ability to download, I guess, my financial position template. So you can actually then determine your own assets, your own liabilities, and your own budget. If you know what they are, then that's a great place to start to then go, well, how do I actually solve that particular problem? So that's the first part of the, I guess, the GPS journey. Now, the second thing that you want to do is keep measuring that. So as you're progressing along the journey, that's going to change from time to time. So as you go into a deal, your cash flow is going to be temporarily depleted. So as you go into your next deal, you need to actually understand that. And so then when you get cashed in, you're going to go up. So that where am I all the time is constantly changing. So you need to be constantly reassessing yourself as you go. So make sure that you actually download that template and I guess keep track of that as you go. That's going to give you massive assistance along the way. The next thing you want to work out is, well, once I know those things, there's three elements that I want to consider with regards to money that it actually takes to run a deal. So there's the equity in order to put down your deposit, okay? There's the serviceability in order to fund the debt, and I guess for the balance of the purchase. And then there's the liquid cash that I need to actually run the deal. So those three elements, when you actually look at that financial position template, you can then start to go, well, where am I weak in those elements? And if I understand where I'm weak, then I can then start to work on, and this is part of that GPS analogy, what do I need to do to actually plug those weaknesses? But you can only do that when you know exactly where you're coming from. So make sure that you do that, I guess, understand those weaknesses. And then from there, you can start to say, well, how do I solve that? So how do I start to become creatively minded and start to resolve the weaknesses that I actually have in those particular elements? Now, I mentioned the three elements. So the equity, the serviceability, and the liquid cash. There's actually three stages that you need it for. So there's the initial purchase to start with. So that is the acquisition stage. Then you may, depending upon the deal size, you may need to refinance that in order to go into a construction phase. And so you're going to move away from one funder potentially into a second funder. Now, as you start to do that, you need to reassess those three things again. So how much equity do I actually have? Do I actually need serviceability if it's going to be a residential style loan, or can I convert that into a commercial type loan where they're looking at the deal itself and the profitability of the deal itself? And then lastly, I'm still going to need some liquid cash to actually run the deal. So, and then the last stage is then, if I'm going to start to keep some stock, what residual debt will I actually have at the end? So there's three elements that you need at three stages, and you want to be constantly measuring yourself about how you're tracking. So that's where am I starting? That's the first part of that GPS analogy. So not understanding your financial constraints is that. You'll then want to start to say, well, how do I creatively solve those? So that might be no money down strategies. That might be joint ventures. It might be option contracts. It might be delayed settlement with early access. It might be that you do project management for someone else. You might do deal finding and all sorts of things like that, where you can actually start to profit from the deal without necessarily having to own the property, okay? So lots of different ways. So 7 different ways we teach to actually control the property and actually financially benefit from that along the way. So that's number 2, is not understanding your financial constraints, okay? So we're 2 deep. Now we're going to get into our 3rd one. So not knowing your development strategy is number 3. Now, this one, I cannot tell you the number of times where I see people not clear on what they want to do. And so they're like a butterfly and they're just kind of dancing around everywhere. Every time the wind blows, they're starting to look at something else. What they've not done is they've not gone and had a hard look at their current financial circumstances and say, well, based on where I am, how do I think I can actually go into some of these big projects? They've got delusions of grandeur of going into a big project, and they haven't really assessed whether or not that's actually practically capable, or if they've got the ability to bolster that with other resources coming in, so joint venture partners, investors, those sorts of things. So they're being a little bit unrealistic with the deal type and deal size they're actually going for. The other thing is that they start on one particular strategy and then they flip and flop. And so they might look at subdivisions today, then they might look at townhouses tomorrow, then they're looking at rooming accommodation, then they're looking at something else. And just as they start to put a whole bunch of effort in, remember I said it's going to take you at least 6 months to be competent, and then at least 9 months to be confident. So if you haven't put that level of effort in, 15 hours a week, putting that effort in, if you haven't put that effort in up to that point, and you start to change strategies, then you've got to redo that first 6 months of competency, and you've got to redo that first 9 months of confidence. So each time you change strategies, you've got to go back to the beginning and start to learn again. So we want to make sure that we lock in a strategy, and we lock in one strategy that I guess we're going to stick with for a long period of time. And the reason for that is we want to start to learn the lessons from the previous deal, and then roll that over into the next deal and go slightly bigger, and then roll those into the next one and again slightly bigger, but learn the lessons each stage, which means it's super important that the development strategy that we're going to choose is scalable. Okay. So when you look at all the different development strategies out there, and there are a ton of them, every single one of them makes money. Let me reassure you. So it doesn't really matter what you choose if you just want to get in and do something, but it does matter what you do if you want to start to scale this and turn this into a business and turn this into a lifestyle that you're actually going to do. And you want to make that efficient and effective. So there's two strategies, two and only two, that are scalable. So the subdivision process, so I can do a 1 into 2 subdivision, 1 into 3, 1 into 4, 1 into 10, 1 into 300. I can do master plan communities, all doing the subdivision process. So this is something that scales. And as you start to scale, you're going to have slightly different issues and challenges because of the size of what you're doing. So in the early days, you don't need to build a road. You probably don't need to build detention basins and all those sorts of things. As you start to get bigger and bigger and bigger, you learn from the lessons of the previous one and then scale that in. So subdivisions is one of those scalable strategies. The next scalable strategy is multi-res. Now, multi-res in itself has two different elements. Now, for almost every council, the rules in that are very similar. So that is townhouses or units. So you've really got a stream 2A and a stream 2B, depending upon which approach that you want to take. Now, with townhouses, you can do a duplex, then you can do a triplex, then a 6-pack and a 10-pack and a 30-pack, and you can keep scaling out that way. With apartments, you might do units on grade. You might do, I guess, a car parking on the ground floor and then some apartments above. And then you might start to do basement parking and start to do medium rise. And then you can go all the way to, 100 stories if you're really wanting to scale. So I guess both of those trajectories, what we're really doing is we're either scaling out, meaning we need more land mass, or we're scaling up, which means that we're actually going to go up towards the sky. But either way, we are scaling. So we want to make sure that we actually get that right. So number 3 is knowing what your development strategy is and choosing one that can actually scale. Now, this is probably one of the most fundamental elements that people completely miss, is choosing that development strategy, because choosing this and getting it right then starts to form the foundations of absolutely everything that you do moving forward. Okay. So it determines what rules you're actually going to learn. It determines what deal size that you're going to do. So you're going to build yourself a deal trajectory. Remember I said 5 to 8 deals to actually get you out? You want to start really small on those and then start to scale those to the point where you're getting to, I guess, a deal size where you're able to keep one of those assets at the end as the profit in the deal. That's the ultimate outcome that we're actually aiming for, folks. So when we started earlier on to say, where are we starting? What is our budget? In order to get that passive income, we want to own a property that is going to generate passive income that is ideally owned outright and ideally generating 100% positive cash flow in doing that process. Now, there's a magic number that I want everyone to memorize here. So the magic number is 6. And that the reason for that magic number is that most developers are aiming for a 20% profit on cost. And when you aim for a 20% profit on cost, that means that if you do 6, when you sell 5, it actually pays down the cost. It pays the debt down, and the 6th one is owned free. Now, because the 6th one is owned free, that means you can keep the profit. You won't actually sell the property. And so 100% of the profit stays in the deal. Now, because you didn't realize the profit, then you've effectively put in place a tax deferral system. That is, at some point in the future, you're going to sell that property and you'll pay tax at that point in time. But because you haven't sold it today, you're not going to realize those profits. So now you've got 100% of the profit staying in the deal. So that's 100% of the property that's going to double every 7 to 10 years if you keep that as an asset. It's also going to be 100% positive cash flow, which is then going to go towards that financial freedom outcome that you're actually after. So what you'll find is in most capital cities, you'll get a net of about 25K passive income out of a property that you actually own outright, if it's either a house or a townhouse and it's well located. Okay, now there's some variables that actually go into that clearly, but you can then start to scale that a little bit based on, well, where is the location of that, and how close are we to assets, and are we able to stack other strategies on top, which I'm not going to go into today because that's going to cause a whole bunch of confusion here. But understanding that we're going to say, well, before I can get to a deal size that's big, before I can do a 6-pack, remember the comment I made before, start with the end in mind. What we want to do is to say, well, how do I start to learn how to do a 6-pack? Well, what I want to do is firstly learn how to do a 4-pack, and maybe then learn how to do a duplex as an example. Or I might do a 6-lot land subdivision, and I might then say, well, how do I do a 4? How do I do a 2? And then we also want to learn how to do some construction. So there's a few elements that we're going to put together to build our deal trajectory, build our 5-year property action plan, okay? That property action plan is basically, what are the skills that I need to learn in order to get to the deal size that I need to get to in order to keep the profits and keep one of those assets owned outright. Now, once we know the deal trajectory, that's then going to start to inform us to say, well, where does that deal start to work? Okay, so if we hadn't chosen our development strategy, then we couldn't have chosen our deal trajectory, which then means that where that deal is going to work, we wouldn't have been able to work out, which is why understanding that development strategy up front is really important. You see, every strategy works, but it doesn't work everywhere. And so what you'll find is where you make a duplex work might be completely different to where you're going to make that 6-pack work. So it's important to say, well, if I want to actually get this duplex as the first project that I'm going to get off the cards, then I want to say, where is that actually going to work? So I want to find areas where there's lots of opportunity that fit the deal size. There's lots of opportunity to fit the land size, the zoning, etc. that's actually going to do that. And when you start to do your assessment criteria, it's amazing how many times that there just aren't a number of opportunities in the area. And equally, there aren't, I guess, the evidence that other people have done it before and proven that they're actually been successful. So we want to start to reverse engineer the suburb and say, well, have other developers gone in, done what it is that we want to do, and have we been able to prove that they are actually profitable? All of that comes from knowing your development strategy. So if you haven't done that, that's the next thing that you want to work out, okay? The other thing that this starts to set up, when you know what your development strategy is, this is going to then start to say, well, if that's what I want to do, that's going to inform who am I going to go and engage from an education perspective, because I don't want to go learn a rooming accommodation type thing if I want to learn subdivisions, for example. And I don't want to go do a subdivision course if I want to learn townhouses. So you want to start to say, well, what is my development strategy going to be? And then let that inform you which course is the best one to solve your needs based on that GPS analogy. Where am I today? Where do I want to go? What are the things that I actually need in order to get there? So if you can start to do that, it will also help if you're wanting to partner with JV partners and things like that. Make sure you're partnering with someone who's doing the development strategy that you want to do. Okay, that way you're going to actually learn from the process as you go. So next one, trying to be mile wide and inch deep. Okay, now what this is really just combining those two previous elements. And what we tend to see is that people are trying to do too many strategies at the same time, and they're trying to look in too many different areas. So they're looking at lots of things, which means that they can't know that in any great depth. So you're mile wide and only inch deep. What we instead want you to do is start to spin it on its head. We want you to be inch wide and mile deep. Same amount of effort. And if you can do that, that's going to help you to massively get traction. Okay, so the same amount of effort. If you look at only one strategy, that is super important. Okay, determine that one strategy is then going to determine your deal size. That deal size is going to determine where, which is going to determine which council rules that you're actually going to start to understand. You see, every strategy that you do, there's actually 537 councils out there in Australia, which means 537 different ways to do the exact same strategy. 537 ways to do a subdivision, 537 different ways to do a duplex, 537 ways to do a townhouse or an apartment complex. So knowing where you want to go means that you can start to narrow down the sets of rules. So that means that you can start with a smaller amount of effort, start to get really good at just knowing your rules right off the top of your head. So then when you start to see a site, it's going to start to just materialize into your brain to say, well, I know exactly what I can actually achieve on there because I'm starting to narrow my focus and get really deep in actually being able to do that. The next thing is narrow that down to just 3 suburbs. Okay. Now, those 3 suburbs need to have lots of opportunity. They need to have evidence that other people have actually done it before. And when you reverse engineer those deals should be on average making profit. Now, if you do that, you should find an area where there's at least between those 3 suburbs, you should have at least 300 opportunities to get yourself into deal size number 1. Now, deal size number 1, you only need 1 of those. Okay. Once you've learnt the lessons from deal size number 1, you can then move up to deal size number 2. We want to step up our deal size. So when we start to look at too many areas, we can't become an area expert. But by narrowing it down into areas with lots of probability and lots of profitability, we only need 1 of those deals. And that's why you can actually narrow it down, start to become an area expert. When you're becoming an area expert, that is, you're going to start to know every street and every zone. You're going to start to know which end of the street is the good end and which end is the bad end. You're going to know which agent is the best agent to buy through, which agent is the best agent to sell through. And so when you start to have an agent just give you a phone call and say, hey, I've got a property on 123 XYZ Street, in your head, you're instantly going to know the zoning. You're instantly going to know, is that a great area? You're instantly going to know what the amenities are nearby. So becoming an area expert is super critical in that stage, okay? And you'll be able to start to do numbers in your head because you know exactly what yield you can get, because you know exactly the rules. You know exactly what those finished product are going to sell for. You know exactly what the buy price should be. And so you're going to start to be able to analyze sites in minutes and hours. We do a toll gating process in what I teach, which is called the property development formula, where in 10 minutes, we're looking for a reason to throw the site away, okay? And we can only do that because we are inch wide and mile deep, and we're able to make those assessments super quick, okay? If it passes that 10-minute test, we then go into a 2-hour test. Again, we're going to put more effort into that, and then at that point, we're ready to actually lock that deal in. And we can only do that because of the fact that we are inch wide and mile deep. You see, if you're mile wide and inch deep, sometimes it takes days or weeks to get to the point where you can actually make an offer, whereas we want to get there in the point of hours. If you can get there in hours, you can take it off the market, you can get rid of all your competition and that sort of thing. So that is number 5, I think, that is trying to be mile wide and inch deep. So number 6, going it alone, okay? Now, going it alone, just thinking that we can actually do it all on our own reconnaissance. And the answer is absolutely you can. And I'm sure that you're going to get success eventually, but it's the speed of the success that is probably the most critical path. I want to give you 3 words which are probably the most powerful thing that will actually resonate. Proximity is power, okay? You want to be near people that are doing things that it is that you want to do, okay? As humans, we are a herd pack. That is, that the herd is trying to protect us. So if you are hanging around with people who don't do property development, then they are trying to protect you. And as you start to tell them, hey, I want to do this property development gig, they're going to say, no, that's dangerous. Don't do that. You don't know what you're doing. And they're going to try and protect you and pull you back into the herd as soon as you start to stray away. Instead, proximity is power. If you start to hang around with a herd that is doing exactly what you want to do, then they're going to start to protect you. And when you start to drift away from them, they're going to go, hey, where are you going? Come back into the safety of this community that is actually going to help you. So that means find yourself a community. So you want to start to go to networking events. Now, obviously, we run networking events all the way around the country. So come to some of those property events. So we run them in 3 states, Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne. And most weekends, we're actually running something. We also live stream these all the way around the country. So if you want to come to one of our events, no matter where you're located. Now, we are putting plans in place to actually extend that well beyond Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne. And pretty soon we're hoping to be able to break into the Adelaide and Perth markets, but we just need a few more people in those areas. So if you're in those areas, make sure that you actually reach out to us and say, hey, we really want you to come. That would be super good. So if you come to those events, you're going to firstly learn from industry experts that are going to help you to actually, I guess, learn the skills that you need to do. You're going to learn from real deals where other people are, I guess, showing you the lessons learned in what went right, what went wrong. You're going to see the numbers that they thought they were going to make. You're going to see the numbers that they actually made. You're going to see the lessons that they actually learned along the way, and they're going to share with you the good, the bad, and the ugly of a project. That's super important. Plus, you then get to, I guess, mastermind with everyone that's going to help you to progress your journey. When you ask for, hey, this is the challenge that I've got on my path, the community itself then starts to help you out. That's super important. Plus, you then get to socialize afterwards for some social drinks and the like, which means that you're actually going to start to build a community that sits around you. That's super important. That way you're not going it alone. Even if you're going to do your deal by yourself, make sure you hang around with people that can actually bounce off issues and challenges and all sorts of things that you're actually doing that, okay? You want to hang around in Facebook communities. So we've clearly got our property development network Facebook community. So make sure that you ask questions into that community to say, hey, I'm not quite sure how to do this. Where can I go for that? Who's the builder recommendation for this? Hang around with that community. Get yourself a mentor, somebody that can actually look over your shoulder. That can be an informal mentor. That can be a formal mentor. Doesn't really matter. But hang around with people that are doing the things that you want to do. Do joint ventures if that's how you prefer to learn. Do joint ventures with people that have actually done it before and are actually going the way that you want to, okay? Beware when you're going into joint ventures with people. In many instances, the person that you're actually doing the joint venture with might be just as green in the journey as you are, and you think they're a little bit more advanced, and they may be, but maybe they're only that much more advanced because they've gone to the effort of actually educating themselves along the way, and put a little bit of effort in first. So just be cautious that you're not going to somebody that's super green. Now, everyone has to do deal number one. So I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying be very cautious that you're assessing their capability up front, and don't ever go into a deal that you don't know yourself how to assess. Do you know that they actually identified every issue and challenge in the project? Have you got the skills in order to do that? So I'm more than happy for you to get skills from other people in their projects, but make sure that you yourself can actually determine whether or not that deal is truly a deal, okay? And do you know that person well enough that you actually want to get into? So that's number 6, don't go it alone, okay? And then lastly, number 7 is not investing in your education, okay? Now, here's the thing with education, and I'm going to give a disclaimer. Obviously, we sell an education program, so I want to, I guess, separate myself from that just momentarily. But let's just be a little bit more broader and say, look, there are hundreds of courses out there, okay? Now, there are going to be fantastic courses out there, and there's also going to be terrible courses out there. Now, whether it's fantastic or whether it is terrible really comes down to a matter of perspective. And the reason for that is, if that course does not suit your needs, as in you don't know what development strategy you want to do, and then you do the course and then you find out, hey, that's not what I want, then that's a terrible course. Now, the person right beside you, if they wanted to actually learn that particular strategy, then for them, that course was a fantastic course. So it's not the course itself, and I want to be really clear, it's not the course itself that's bad, it's the fact that you didn't assess the course to say, does it suit my needs? Does it suit the strategy that I want to choose in order to move forward? And I think a lot of people kind of miss that element, and they see the person at the front of the room, and the person at the front of the room has lots of knowledge, and they're imparting lots of wisdom, and it sounds like a great idea to actually invest in. But for you, it might not be, but the person beside you, it might be. So you want to just put yourself into the perspective of saying, well, what is it that I want to do? And is this person the right person to actually get me there? So that's the first thing, okay? Now, assuming that you're going to go into an education program, or not. That's one of the other things that you want to start to do. Either way, you want to invest in the education element. So you could invest in, hey, I'm going to joint venture with somebody. I'm going to learn from that. Okay, you can invest in your time, your effort, in order to put the hard yards in to learn it yourself. Either way, you need to invest in that education. It doesn't have to be a paid course. I want to be very clear on that. But if you do, uh, either way, you want to recognize that whether you are paying for a paid course or whether you're doing it yourself, either way, it's going to cost you money irrespective. And I want you to be very, very clear on that. So if you're doing it alone, if you're going it alone, it's going to cost you money in the mistakes that you're probably going to make on the I guess the project itself. You may get into the wrong deal and you might get stuck and you might not be able to get out of it. I've seen that many, many times in our community with people that got into a deal without that knowledge first, and only to work out then that it was a dud. Okay. It might be a cracking deal. So you might actually have picked a winner first go, in which case, kudos to you. But you might not run the deal as effectively and efficiently as humanly possible, which means that the project takes longer to run. It might have more holding costs. You might have paid a little bit too much for the advice that you got, those sorts of things. So lots of missed opportunities potentially where you might have got an extra dwelling out of the site, or squeeze the project design a little bit to make it a more effective and more efficient design, so it could actually be a little bit more cost effective for you. So if you're going to do it yourself, if you're going to educate yourself, just know that those opportunities to, I guess, potential lost profit is still a cost, even though it's indirect. Okay. Or alternatively, you can pay for the course up front, or you can pay for education up front, or a mentor to sit over you, or however you want to do that. And I guess if you do so, I guess you're going to accelerate your learning. You're going to learn from, I guess, their successes. You're going to learn from their previous failings. So that means that they're lessons that you don't need to learn for yourself. It's also potentially an insurance policy for yourself so that you don't actually make mistakes. So you might be wanting to go into a deal. You've got somebody looking over your shoulder that's going to determine whether or not that deal really is a good deal, that sort of thing. So, understand that, if somebody can save you from getting into a dud, that in itself, just that insurance policy of saving you from getting into a dud is worth as much money as whatever if you were going to buy $1 million property. That one piece of advice just saved you $1 million if you got into a dud deal. So you want to make sure that you're really weighing that up in doing that. And the one parting gesture that I would say in this is, if you're wanting to go it alone and you can, and I highly, my encouragement is that you want to make sure that you have somebody beside you, at least, even if you've got two friends working together to try and work this out together. Don't expect someone else's results doing it your own way. Okay, so if you want to see the results of whichever particular educator you want to follow, if you want to get their results, don't expect you're going to get those results by doing it yourself without a lot of hard work and a lot of mistakes that you're going to actually learn along the way. Now, as I said, disclaimer, I obviously do sell an education program. So I'm just going to flash up a link to that right now. I'm not going to go into that. I'm not doing any sales pitches. It's called Property Development Formula. It does go for 12 months. It is both an education, mentoring, and coaching program. So it is quite holistic. So I'm not going to go into a sales pitch. If you're interested in learning a little bit about that, go to the link, and if you want to know a little bit more, just reach out to the team, and we will more than happily have a chat to you. Now, that said, I'm going to see if we've got anyone out in Facebook land who wants to ask me any questions. But there are 7 questions, folks. So if there's, 7 mistakes, I should say. So if there's anyone out there, let me see if I can find any questions from our community. Give me 2 secs while I work. Okay, I can see a whole bunch of you there. Let me just bring this to another screen. And I can see lots of people saying hello. So, hey, Karen, Chaz, and everyone else. Let me see. I can't see any questions from anyone, just people saying hello. That's lovely. Hello, everybody. If you've got any questions, folks, chip them in. I'm more than happy to respond to you. I've got a few minutes spare. I guess wanted to go through those 7 elements as quick as humanly possible. The one thing I can see a question that has come in from Shimran. So Shimran says, would you advise to remain cashed up given the current circumstances, interest rates, new governments, etc., or make a move now as all predictions of property corrections are baseless? Any words of wisdom? Shimran, I've covered this question a number of times, mate, with regards to being able to read the market. Okay, so there's 16 elements that are the drivers that drive uh, our uh, our property development industry. Okay, so they come down to uh, government incentives, I guess both direct cash, jobs being created, infrastructure projects, etc. They come down to, I guess, the amount of interest rates, how many people are actually employed, all those sorts of things that are actually driving it. And there's 16 elements. Go watch one of my previous YouTubes on being able to read the market. That's going to give you the insights in there. That's going to say, what do you do in order to predict the future? Now, predicting the future is a little bit like a crystal ball, okay? So it's never going to be 100% perfect. But what you can do, there's indicators and drivers. So an indicator is measuring what has already happened. So I guess median house prices, auction clearance rates, I guess vacancy rates, those sorts of things, days on market. That's what has happened. Okay, but the drivers are what do we think is going to happen. So if you start to measure the drivers and then assess the indicators, so we're trying to predict 6 months in the future, and then in 6 months we want to look back and go, well, what actually happened from a driver's perspective? Did I actually get that right? If you keep doing that back and forth, you're going to get a really good view on that. Now, with regards to your question, okay, so your question is, where do we think it's going to go? Well, we just had an election yesterday. New government has come in. There's a whole bunch of new policies that are proposed but not yet in. Those new policies are going to have a massive impact on our property market. It's too early to tell right now the implications of that. So, firstly, it's a policy, it's not actually set in stone. The timelines for that haven't been rolled out. So, there's a lot that's going to unfold in the next month to 2 months that's going to impact, I guess, what's actually happening. That said, some of the drivers that we're talking about, the fundamentals that are driving our market, right now, the majority of them are stable for most areas. Okay. So, population growth has been low for some time because our markets have been closed, but population growth is starting to come back. The number of development applications that were approved previously is low because our market had skyrocketed and people weren't actually doing development applications because they weren't buying into sites that were too expensive. That's going to create a hole, which is going to create an undersupply later on. So there's a whole bunch of things that are telling us that the market will kick again at some point. However, I need to, I guess, caution that with let's wait to see what the new government policies are actually going to be in order to do that. So right this very second, my crystal ball is a little cloudy, but I do on a regular basis, I guess where are we going in the market? It's called Over the Horizon. So I'm going to do one of those in about 2 months' time once all the dust has settled from the election and see where it is that we think that that's actually going to go. So watch this space for that Over the Horizon event. And if you want to understand what those elements are, go look at my previous Over the Horizon presentations on YouTube and you should be able to find that. Okay. There's a couple of statements in here rather than questions. So realigning a block is a question mark, Karen. So Karen, realigning a block is, I guess, in the subdivision strategy path. So that might be that you've got some boundary lines that might already be there. You might have multiple titles already on the lot. And by, I guess, moving the line, you're actually having to comply with the subdivision process. And so all the rules that sit in and around that. So that is going down that subdivision path. Now, costs and timeframes and that sort of thing on that, I guess a typical subdivision from start to finish by the time you purchase it versus, I guess, by the time you actually sell the finished product. If you're just doing the land component, it's about 9 months, give or take. If you're going to do a construction of a brand new house on that, add another 9 months on that. So maybe an 18-month project. Hope that helps. Simran's got another question. So are all good development potential sites secured off market? How true is that? If yes, how are effective buyers agents to secure one? Simran, I'm going to say it's a mixed bag here, mate. You need to have multiple attack vectors. You need to be looking at what is on market. You need to be looking at what is off market. You need to be door knocking yourself. You need to be sending letters out. You need to have relationships with agents. You need to fill your funnel from many, many sources. Okay, it's not just from the one location. If you don't, what's going to happen is you're going to excite the vendor through one of those attack vectors. But let's just imagine that you're talking to an agent and the agent goes and excites them, but they say, I don't want to deal with an agent because I don't want to pay agents commission. That means that if you had have gone through a different attack vector, being a letter to them or a door knock, they would have been able to deal with you direct, and you've missed that opportunity. You go to the house next door, and if you go direct, they're going to hate the fact that you're impacting on them, and they're going to say, oh, I'm only going to deal with you through an agent, and so they'll go talk to the agent, but you've actually activated their interest in the sale. So you want to make sure that you're doing multiple attack vectors at the same time. Otherwise, you're going to excite someone into the sales process, and they're going to go somewhere else in order to do that potentially. So you've only really got a 50-50 hit chance, whichever attack vector you go in, that it's actually going to work, okay? That said, that looks like it's all the questions that we've actually got coming through. So hopefully you guys have got plenty out of that. I'm just going to go through, I guess, those 7 common basic mistakes that people make. Again, just in summary. So setting unrealistic expectations of yourself and trying to do it way too fast, way too early. Not having a clear path for success, meaning that you haven't actually determined what your deal trajectory is, etc. Not understanding your financial constraints and how to actually solve them. So that is really key to know where you are starting in the first place, okay? Not knowing what your development strategy is. So what are the rules that I'm going to do? What's the deal size I'm going to do? Where is that actually going to start to work? And how do I actually become an area expert in that? Trying to become mile wide and inch deep. So mile wide and inch deep is one development strategy, one council, which means one set of rules, and 3 suburbs to actually become an area expert in, okay? Next one is going it alone, trying to do it all by yourself, and I guess make sure that you're hanging around with communities that are actually doing things the same way that you want to do them, and you can actually learn from the success and or failings of other people along the way. And lastly, not investing in your education. That is time, effort, and money. In order to do that, you want to make sure you put all of that effort in up front before you go and purchase a property. Do not expect that you go and buy a deal and then that some educator or mentor is going to sit over your shoulder and say how to fix the problem that you actually got into. Instead, you want to learn that stuff up front and make sure you get into the right deal in the first place. Anyway, folks, they are the 7. Hopefully you got plenty out of that. And I cannot wait to see you guys on at our next meetup. Oh, brand spanking new news, folks. I forgot to mention this earlier, and hopefully you haven't all run away. But because we're actually coming up to our 10th birthday, want to announce 2 really exciting pieces of news. So the first one is our birthday itself, our birthday celebrations are going to be in the month of August. Okay, so that will celebrate 10 years. And what we want to do is have an absolutely cracking and cranking room. We want that room filled to the brim of everyone, I guess, who's enjoying this process. So that is, if you come to one of our events, I guess, in the next couple of months, you will, and this is where to go for the links on those. If you want to come to one of those events, you'll be able to bring a friend for free. Okay, so you register and come and I guess register for the event. It will then send you a coupon code to actually share with a friend and bring them for free. That way, we're going to get, I guess, much more people in the room. Then on top of that, if you physically turn up to the room, okay, we are going to start to count how many times you turn up. And as soon as, because it's our 10th birthday, if you turn up 10 times to a physical event, the first 50 people that get to 10 physical events, we're going to give away a holiday worth $1,000. Okay, so that's a massive, massive piece of news. I can only do that for 50 people, I'm afraid. So make sure that you start to physically come. And when you RSVP, you can then invite a friend. Okay, so no matter where you are located, we run these currently in Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne, and we also live stream them. So make sure that if you are interested in coming, that you do that physically where humanly possible. Anyway, folks, that's it for today. Hopefully you got plenty out of that, and I can't wait to see you on the flip side. Till then, bye for now.